Welcome to today's episode of Beyond the First Million. I'm your host, Gideon Drucker, alongside, much closer actually, but alongside my much taller colleague, Jordan Haines. How are we doing today?
Good. I can touch your shoulder now.
And you can see my screen. I don't really...
It's disconcerting, huh?
Even though we're looking at the same information, I don't know. I might have to move this over, just keep my own set here.
When you work at home for so long, it's like weird when other people can see your
Correct.
screen because you're never used to it.
Yeah. You're used to doing whatever you want on your own timing. Today's episode, talking about what personal finance experts, gurus get wrong. But we're going to talk about spreadsheet math. I think everybody knows the beginnings of kind of making fun of personal finance gurus' advice, kind of that classic example of if you spent $5 a day on coffee, 4 days a week, 4 weeks a year, 52, and you multiplied that by the return, you're giving up $7 million, $3 million. You're giving up so much money by the time you retire. Mm-hmm. And kind of, well, yes, if you compound anything over 30 years, that is going to seem like an outrageous amount of money. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have done the thing on day one. Lots of things we spend money on, again, would compound in a ridiculous fashion over time.
I bought a $20 pen the other day, which pens are like, I don't know. I love this pen and it was completely useless. And I remember talking to a buddy of mine who's like, I only buy the cheapest things. Like I just want the cheapest thing so that I can get ahead. And I'm like, well, I kind of enjoy my life a little bit. And like, I want this pen to feel nice when it's on. How much
are you using?
I do a lot of things on a notebook. So
Okay.
a lot of like my organization when I'm meeting with clients.
Feeling good about it in your hand, that is worth the price. What do they say? A fool knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing. That's what we're talking about. So I think everybody understands that coffee advice, that avocado toast was ridiculous. You're not going to not retire one day because you spent money on avocado toast. You're not going to end up with less money than you need when you're reaching financial independence because of how much coffee or that you spent a little bit extra on breakfast on the way to work.
It often feels to me like you're optimizing on the small things and neglecting some of the more important things.
Exactly. And that's why I think that advice has become almost a punchline over the last bunch of years, that everybody knows that it's ridiculous because once you get to a certain level of income, of assets, those decisions don't move the needle. And we've spent time talking about that. For most of our clients, it is the $100,000 decisions that matter, not the $10 decisions.
Right.
Where you're choosing to live, your property taxes, what level of home you're buying, if you're sending your kids to private school, if you want a dual income household versus one, if you're going to get that next job that maybe has worse hours, but you're doubling your income. The point isn't that small decisions don't matter. It's that they stop being the driver of success as your income and assets grow. So today we're talking about the next level of personal finance. We're going to define it as spreadsheet math.
Love it.
All right.
Yeah.
Spreadsheet finance. Spreadsheet finance looks at every financial decisions really through only one lens. What's the most optimized decision on paper? Everything is viewed through that lens of how do I maximize the amount of money I'll have when I'm 60, 70, 80, 95. Some examples might be, don't buy the $3 million home if the $1.5 million home gets the job done, accomplishes the same things. Don't lease a new car. Buy used, never fly business class. Don't upgrade the hotel if you don't need to. Don't hire someone that you could technically do yourself. Don't pay off the mortgage if you have a low interest rate. Basically, anything that a personal finance expert would say is wasting money.
Personal finances are more personal than they are financial.
Right.
And I think one of the grand assumptions that finance gurus make is that there's one right way.
And that right way is whatever maximizes the most amount of money you have on the paper.
Right.
Things like when you should pay off your mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a 3% interest, well, you should never pay off your mortgage early because you could earn more money by investing than that mortgage payment, which is true. But also, I have had clients that said, yeah, I get it, but I've had this mortgage around my neck for 20 years. And if I could not have another mortgage payment for the rest of my life and I can wake up every morning knowing that I own outright the house I live in, holy shit, that'll make me feel good. The amount of money that you keep in the bank. We typically recommend 6 months of living expenses, 1 to 2 years of planned expenditures. But some clients like having 12 months. Some clients like, it's not even about the number of months. They like having 200,000, I'm thinking of a client, 200,000 in the bank, high yield savings account. So it's not in a checking account, but it lets them sleep at night. It makes them feel like they can be more aggressive and growth oriented and listen to what we say on the investing side because they have that cash on hand. Mm-hmm. These are decisions. Again, it's not about spending versus saving, but it's the same framework of what is the optimized best decision on paper versus what actually feels the best for your life, for how you think about money, for what just lets you sleep at night. Your goal in life and the point of proper planning is to get to a point where you can ignore spreadsheet math entirely, where you can do the thing that is not the most optimized decision on paper because you're confident that you're on the right track.
There's this tension that a lot of people feel where they're On one hand, they feel like they should be doing something, whether it's from a guru, a family member, a friend, or just something they've got in their mind forever. I had a client who they've always wanted this chair, and it's an expensive chair, all things considered. Told her like this, don't should yourself. It's okay if you buy this chair because it's important to you. And no, this is not the spreadsheet answer, but you're not a spreadsheet, you're a person. And this is going to bring you a lot of joy. And that's going to be the thing that's most important to you.
It's okay to not make the most optimized decision. That is what the heck we're working for. Everybody has those decisions that they just say, it's not about the dollar amount, it's that it feels frivolous. My dad is financially independent, he's done a great job. There are still things that just on principle, he's not going to spend money on. But having that freedom to say, I don't give a shit what it says on paper, this is going to improve my life. There becomes a point at which making another decision that increases your net worth by 2% is not actually making your life better by 2%. Now, I want to talk more examples and bigger examples. A few that we hear all the time. Leasing a car. Hey, is leasing a car the most mathematically financial spreadsheet best decision? No, you're paying a premium to do so. But sometimes it's really fun and really cool to drive a new car every 3 years. If you're at a point where you can make that decision, where that is not throwing off any part of your future financial plan, why the heck not? Or maybe you do want to buy that larger home. Would not having that larger house mean a little bit more money 30 years from now? But if we're no longer solving for financial independence because you're already on the track there, maybe that larger house really will be cool. Maybe your backyard is where your whole extended family comes every summer. Maybe the extra bedroom means your parents visit more. The pool is where your future grandkids learn to swim. Those are all rationalizations in a sense. And that leads us to really the biggest bone to pick with some of the spreadsheet math, things that cost more money in general. Again, not across the board. There's more value there. You enjoy it more. It's more fun. It gives you back more of your time.
It's almost like we've attached a moral good to saving equals good, spending equals bad.
Right. And that's just not really how life works. And that's where I think the truism, money doesn't bring happiness, needs a little bit of a caveat in the sense that money by itself doesn't make you happy. If you're unhappy in life, if you're unhappy in your relationships, money probably won't change that because you're assigning money a job it can't do. But it is a multiplier in the sense that if you're already a pretty content person, having more money can make you happier. It can make you less stressed. It can make life easier. It buys time, options, experiences, convenience.
Almost inevitably, more than 50% of the clients will have that conversation where like, what do you want to do in the future? It's like more than half will be like, I want $5 million. And it's always $5 million. And I will always follow that up as saying, why? Why? This means that I can stop working when I'm 50. And I said, well, it's not $5 million you want. It's that you want to stop working when you turn 50. Why? Oh, because I want to spend time with my family. Okay, so it's not that. It's because you want to spend time with your family. That's the thing that you're working towards. And that's what you're optimizing for. You're not optimizing for accumulating as much of this stuff. Because at the end of the day, like you just said, money is a tool. It's being used to do something with. And the sooner you can realize that and use it in a smart way, the more fun life becomes.
Then the next question, if we want to even just focus on the spreadsheet math, is, well, how much income are you going to need at age 51 to replace the income that you're no longer earning, which is not necessarily a function of how much your dollars, your net worth. It's a function of how you've been saving, how you've been investing, and what we can turn that money into. This whole conversation is something I think I've evolved on myself. When I was starting my career as an advisor, I definitely leaned into some of this personal financial coaching of live below your means, save more than you can spend. And all of this is true. It's just not the final level of advice, of information. And I used to talk about, more than anything else, lifestyle creep. You want to avoid lifestyle creep, where you just wake up one day and you spend $12,000 a month on shit that you don't need, you don't care about, and that doesn't bring you joy. That is bad. But lifestyle creep as an idea is a good thing. If your income doubles over the course of your career, why shouldn't your quality of life improve too?
I think you and I, we've evolved to this point where lifestyle creep has become, in my mind, it's just normal. It makes sense. It's natural. I mean, early on in my career, I remember like that was the main thing that I would preach with clients. If you're going to make more money, please don't spend more. Maintain your lifestyle right now, and it will stretch you even farther. And it hasn't been until the last 2 or 3 months. And when I read this in our prep notes before, I was like, you know what? Gideon and I are on the same page with this, because I think it's natural. If you're going to earn more money and you're going to grow and progress in your career and in your life and with your family, your lifestyle will grow. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing.
And I think there's an element to us both saying that at the beginning of our careers, when a 24-year-old advisor telling a married couple in 45 with 3 kids and responsibilities that I can't even dream with, as you're making more money, you don't want to have your expenses go up. That would be crazy. Yeah, it's easy for me to say that at 24, single, sharing an apartment with 3 of my buddies. Now we're both on the other side of that. I'm married. You have 3 kids. I'm expecting my first in January. Weird way to announce that to the podcast. I was actually going to set that up as an opening. But yeah, expenses go up. Lifestyle goes up. The things that are important to you change. So lifestyle creep is a good thing. It's something that should be celebrated as long as it is intentional. And we talk a lot about spend money on the things that bring you joy and try to strip out anything that doesn't. The thing that I care about the most in terms of what I am willing to spend money on is anything that minimizes my hassle and provides me time. It's 80 degrees and I don't have to sweat getting off of a train, a subway, be uncomfortable where I get somewhere. I'm going to take an Uber and I'm not even going to think twice.
For me, I spend my day doing 3 things: sleeping, working, or hanging out with my family. And so whatever I can do to maximize that time is what I want. So there is no part of me that feels bad about spending a lot of money on a bed or sheets or something in my room that helps me sleep good. There's no part of me that feels bad about buying a really nice chair for my office because I'm going to sit in it a lot, or buy some nice equipment or a $20 pen. And there's no part about me that feels bad about spending on things that allow me to be present with my family in the 8 hours a day that I can do that.
It's funny. We answer that question not only with different things, but actually entirely different frameworks, where I said the things, regardless of what area of my life it's in, the thing that just annoys me is hassle and taking too much time for something that shouldn't take that much time. But you framed it in a different direction, which was, these are the 3 most important elements of my life. I'm going to spend the money that I'm comfortable with in those 3 areas. It can be the individual thing, material things, it can be experiences, but they have to fit under that 3 areas of life, or it's just not something I'm going to care much about.
If it's going to keep me from doing the things that I really want to do, I'm likely going to spend money on it because I don't want to have to deal with it.
If you eliminate shit you don't want to do, guess what? You're going to have more time and energy to do the things that you really do. So to bring this back to our opening idea, and we're going to end with a thought experiment, as it were, getting to a point financially where you can graduate from spreadsheet math, where you can make the suboptimal decision. I heard the idea on a podcast, but the idea of spreadsheet finance makes me think of one client that I think I actually spoke about on an earlier episode, but they came to us with this master, incredible spreadsheet. So good that I said, hey, I'm going to actually borrow the template because I think it could be helpful with certain clients that need it. But I said, but guess what? You don't. You're already financially on track. You've accumulated $5 million. Not that the number itself matters, but just to put some numbers, some context to it. You don't need to operate off of a spreadsheet anymore. If you threw out the spreadsheet and we built out a saving that you need to do to get where you need to go, which by the way, wouldn't change any part of your spending behavior, you're already doing it and you're going to be just fine. That is the point of personal finance. Now, we spent the whole episode saying this, so I'm going to issue a caveat in the last few minutes that personal finance education advice is a good thing. We're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. It's helpful when you get your start. Before we're talking about this, and again, our clients are high income earning mid-career professionals. They're in their 40s plus. They've been working for 20 years. They're making north of $500,000 generally. We're speaking to our audience. So yes, you get to that point and there are decisions you don't have to optimize because you're already on the right track. But when you're in your 20s, when you're building, hustling, grinding, yes, you should have a budget. You should focus on saving more than you spend, on not maxing out the credit card. So that is great median advice for the median financial situation, which by the way is most of America, right? Obviously. But we're talking to clients that's in the rearview mirror. And they can afford to think about that in the rearview mirror. And that's why so much financial media advice is going, how do we reach the most eyeballs? Well, the most eyeballs are going to read an article about you're giving up a retirement nest egg if you spend money on coffee, because that affects most people that scroll on to CNBC in the morning. You're playing a different game than you were when maybe that advice hit. So imagine you have 2 families. They both spent 40 years making great money, saving, investing, doing most of the right things, and building significant net worth. Now, the first person spent their life optimizing spreadsheet math, every financial decisions, choosing the cheaper option in terms of how they traveled, buying the smaller house. They never leased the car. They had the same car for 10, 15 years, delaying purchases until the absolute moment where they needed a thing and then they bought it. Every decision was filtered through that spreadsheet math mentality of which option will provide the most money at the end of the day. The second family also made smart financial decisions. They saved aggressively, they invested, they were disciplined, but as their net worth grew, as they were becoming financially independent, they stopped trying to maximize every dollar they had. They bought the big house when they reached a certain level that they felt comfortable and they knew it would bring them joy. They leased the car because they enjoyed driving something new every few years, and they actually got excited by the idea of figuring out what they were going to drive next. They started taking incredible vacations and bringing their kids and their grandkids along for great 2 to 3 weeks together. They paid for convenience, hired help when it reduced stress. They did all the things that money can afford that we've been spending the episode talking about. That's how they lived over 30, 40 years. First person that really, I don't want to say cut corners, but they didn't change their behavior. Their lifestyle did not creep up over time, dies with 24 million. The second person who started to enjoy, luxuriate in their money a little bit more, dies with 16 million. They're both enormously wealthy. Their children are taken care of. Retirement is on track. Neither are ever in any danger whatsoever of running out of money. Well, who won? Who would you rather be in this situation? Did the first person really win because they died with $8 million more? By spreadsheet math, they made every right financial decision and did 33% better than the other person. But I think if you listen to that comparison, you say, well, if I have $16 million and it achieves everything that I need out of life that I'm going for, I'd rather enjoy that money and end up with a little bit less. That also doesn't have to be the right answer. If somebody is legacy minded and they want to make an impact and they want to donate, and well, sure. But aside from impact, legacy, dying with the most amount of money is typically not what we're trying to solve for, and it's not what clients are looking for. So that's the question I would leave you with. I don't know if you have anything to wrap up to that, but 16 million, 24 million. If you just look at the numbers, that is a shit ton more money. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what impact it has on their financial life, it changes really absolutely nothing.
Yeah. You're not a spreadsheet. You're a human being. You have things that are important to you, things that matter to you. Those are the things that you're going to design a life for, not just for making as much money as possible and accumulating as much as possible. In both cases, they were financially secure, financially stable. Obviously, don't do stupid things.
This whole episode, listen to in the wrong lens, is not good financial advice, right? If somebody is not on track, they don't know they're spending versus saving, and they listen to this and they're like, yeah, Jordan and Gideon said we should go buy a bigger house. We should go. No, we are assuming that everybody that is taking this in the way it's intended has a financial plan. They are saving, they're doing the things, they know what their output looks like, and then they can think about how they want to spend their money. But if you haven't done that work, literally everything we're saying doesn't make any sense, and you should not take it to heart. Assuming you have, this is the cool stuff that you get to start thinking about. Yeah. So build a life you want, know what you want, and then get after it. With that, have a wonderful day. If you're enjoying the podcast, you're getting value out of this, little nuggets that you're thinking on, that you're talking about with your spouse, with your friends, please like, subscribe, share it around. We want to build the audience. We're going to stick to this. We're not going anywhere. And hey, if you get to it, write a review. We'd appreciate that as well. With that, we'll see you next Thursday. Have a wonderful week.